Okay, if you're a Led Zeppelin fan, I think you're going to really love this video. We've been making a lot of Led Zeppelin videos lately. I don't mean to turn this into a Led Zeppelin channel, but I'm kind of a fan. And I went back and I found something really, really cool. I went back right after In Through the Outdoors was released. And I found a couple different newspapers with some reviews of the record. One of them is kind of a more positive review, and one of them is kind of a more negative review. And I wanted to read these to you and see what you think, get your feedback on which one of these that you relate to more. It's kind of an interesting take both these guys have on this record. And In Through the Outdoors, it came out in 1979, and it was it had been a while since they put a record out, and it was something of a departure. And that's interesting because when you look at Led Zeppelin, they weren't afraid of doing all kinds of different things throughout their career. So when I say departure, I mean when you went from 1 to 2 to 3, 2 to 3 was kind of a departure, and then 3 back to 4 was a little. So they were just kind of changing a lot. And so when I say that, it's recognizing that they were regularly trying new things. And In Through the Outdoor was definitely one of those things, because you had a song, for example, like Hot Dog on there, which was kind of a rockabilly song. And they just did some really unique stuff on that album. And I've known people over the years that have had kind of different takes on whether or not they really like it or not. And here's my copy of it. One of the cool things about this record, when it was released, they put it in these kind of paper bag looking things. And then they had the shrink wrap over it, so you couldn't tell what album cover you had. And they had 6 versions. I think it was six versions of this album cover. And so, but on this paper bag, just had Led Zeppelin In Through the Outdoor on one side, and then on this side, it had all the tracks that were on the record. And then I'll show you what my version is. Anyway, there's what my cover looks like. And then there's that side. I had a friend that had all the covers. And we one time got them together. And basically all the different covers were just different angles of that same picture. And actually, one of the other cool things about it, the original pressing, this one doesn't do it, but even the inside here, you could actually get this wet. And it would be kind of like if you ever saw those old things where you'd be able to just take a wet paintbrush, little kids' books, and paint over it, and the color would then come alive. You could do that with these, I think it was the original pressing. This one doesn't do it. Anyway, kind of a neat thing. It was kind of a unique album, unique packaging, like a lot of their albums had some unique things to it. So anyway, I wanted to read these 2 articles to you. And again, I'm going to not make a ton of comments about it, my feelings, because I'd really like to get your thoughts then in the comments. Which of these 2 people do you relate to? And what are your other thoughts about this record? And of course, this record came out in 1979, and when these articles were written, this was less than a year before we lost John Bonham. And so this was kind of the end of Led Zeppelin. So anyway, this first article, this is from the Daily Utah Chronicle, Wednesday, October 24th, 1979. And the article is titled, "Zeppelin's Impending Doom Fades with Sparkling Comeback Door." All right, so here's the article. For a while, it seemed as if Led Zeppelin had had its day. 2 nondescript albums and personal tragedies for the members of the Zepp, coupled with the onslaught of disco, spelled disaster foreboding for the heavy metal scene. And the Led Zeppelin simply gave up, or so it seemed. After a 2-year respite, Led Zeppelin is back with what is, if not their best album, at least a refreshing comeback for the English quartet. In Through the Outdoor features Led Zeppelin as they have never played before, with experiments into reggae, jazz, ballads, and even punk mixed with the classic Zeppelin sound of Song Remains the Same and Stairway to Heaven days. The Zepp have obviously been listening and listening hard during their years of solitude. For example, Southbound Suarez, a syncopated Jamaican-sounding song, has an interlude featuring steel drums, congas, and drummer John Bonham doing some rhythms one would never have imagined from the percussionist who, with bassist John Paul Jones, was once dubbed the world's clumsiest rhythm section by Rolling Stone. Did you know that? Rolling Stone had called them the world's clumsiest rhythm section. I'd actually never heard that before I read this. Hey, hold on for just a second. We'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. In fact, the time off has improved all of the members of the band, with the unfortunate exception of Jimmy Page. His over-long solos are mere shadows of former greatness. In the evening, it gets to the point that one wonders if his fingers have been caught painfully in his guitar strings and he's trying valiantly but unsuccessfully to extricate himself. But no matter, Zepp's willingness to experiment with new styles easily overcomes Page's problems. Hot Dog bears a remarkable resemblance to early Elvis rockabilly songs of the mid-50s. All My Love, the current radio single, is almost a ballad. And Fool in the Rain is enough to convince any new wave fanatic that Led Zeppelin hasn't forgotten their roots in good old rock and roll. But the most memorable of the songs on the album, Carouselambra and the bluesy I'm Gonna Crawl, are classic Led Zeppelin. The first a flashback to the Houses of the Holy album, and the latter sounding like a cut from Led Zeppelin's debut album more than a decade ago. It remains to be seen if Led Zeppelin can recapture their former popularity, especially with the slump in sales for even the most established groups. And though they are changing, In Through the Outdoor is a good indication that Led Zeppelin isn't about to sell out their style in the face of any new rage, be it disco, punk, or Irish sea ballads. And that's kind of interesting, too, when you think about the situation of pop culture and music at the time, because in 1979, disco was the rage. You know, the Bee Gees were huge. Saturday Night Fever had come out, a couple years before that, but ABBA was big. And so, yeah, disco was happening. And so they put this out in the middle of it. And this is so far removed. The only thing that maybe was similar to what was going on at that time was that they were introducing some synthesizers into the music, but really stylistically they weren't, at least in my opinion, it didn't seem like it, and this writer seems to say the same thing. They weren't picking up on any disco vibes or any of the things that were really popular at the time. Still, as Led Zeppelin often did, they were just kind of blazing their own trail. Anyway, so In Through the Outdoor, far from being a nostalgia trip, puts Led Zeppelin back on a firm footing after years without producing anything noteworthy. Here's hoping that the Zepp can continue to experiment and progress while hanging on to their identity instead of rehashing the already worn musical cliches that seem to be inundating the AM and, unfortunately, the FM dials right now. In Through the Outdoor is a bright reminder that it really can be done. Okay, so there's a relatively positive review of In Through the Outdoor just a couple of months after it came out. And other than a little criticism of Jimmy Page and his playing, and in actually this song In the Evening, although that I love the track, I actually really, really love that song. It does have a little bit of a muddy sound, and when Jimmy Page starts soloing, it's kind of, for me, it does get a little bit lost in there in kind of the muddy sound of the song, but I actually still really, really love In the Evening. So, okay, so that was review number one. This one was put out a couple months later on December 15th, 1979 in the Times Leader. And the title of this article, this review, is called Led Zeppelin Fans Could Have Waited a Little Longer. Okay, here's the article. For Led Zeppelin fans, the band's ninth album, In Through the Outdoor, has been a long time coming. 3.5 years after the release of the four-man British group's last solo album, Presence, the band's popularity remains high. Even rock radio stations that never play album cuts are playing this LP. In Through the Outdoor, Swan Song Records, comes wrapped in a brown paper bag stamped with the album's name and song titles. Once the purchaser gets his record home and opens the wrapper, he finds one of several different album covers. He also finds the record inside and maybe a bit of disappointment. The 7 songs on In Through the Outdoor do not sound like the result of 3.5 years of effort by one of the world's supergroups. Some of them don't sound completely finished. Side 1 starts out with In the Evening, a simple repetitious tune with lyrics often rendered unintelligible by the multiple tracking of Robert Plant's voice. It goes on for nearly 7 minutes. So far, so bad. Next comes Southbound Suarez, with emphasis on John Paul Jones keyboards, including a bit of ragtime piano, and a tasty guitar break. This one is okay. Fool in the Rain, a reggae and Latin-flavored love song, is the best developed tune on the LP. Plant's voice is, for the first time on this record, the awesome instrument it can be, and the total effect created is just right. And by the way, I actually love that song. And it's such, and that is really, I think maybe my favorite song on that album, simply because it does feel, as he put it here, kind of finished. It feels like they really, really thought that one out. And not just not only is the music fun, but the story in the song and the kind of twist at the end, a fool standing on the wrong block. I think that's how it ends. Anyway, it's kind of that is a great, great song, and very unique when you look at the entire Led Zeppelin catalog. Okay. Finishing off the side is Hot Dog. Let's see. From its country-type introduction, it is clear Zepp is trying something different, and this one works. Hot Dog is a country rocker in the tradition of early Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis. At 3 minutes and 15 seconds, it is the shortest tune on the LP, and not a second is wasted. And you might find this interesting. Some of you know I used to be a professional musician, and I played in a cover band a long time ago. This is back in the early 90s. And when we were coming up with all the songs we wanted to play, I had made the suggestion. I said, why don't we play Hot Dog from In Through the Outdoor? And I actually didn't think anybody would even know what the song was, because it was kind of an oddball song on this, Led Zeppelin's last album. And so we figured out the song, we started playing it, and it was crazy to note that song, every single time we ever played it, just went over like crazy. People loved it. So I don't know if it was because they loved it because it was a Led Zeppelin song, or just because it was such a great song. But it is just interesting to note that song would get such great response. Okay. Now, let's see. Hot Dog, country rocker, Jerry Lee Lewis. At 3 minutes and 15 seconds, it is the shortest tune on the LP, and not a second is wasted. The same cannot be said for the first song on side 2, Carouselambra, an ambitious 10.5-minute track that seems to be several shorter pieces strung together. Unlike the group's earlier Stairway to Heaven, this one doesn't go very far. Despite excellent guitar work by Jimmy Page and Jones keyboards that make the song reminiscent of some of Emerson, Lake and Palmer's more rambling jams. All My Love, a pleasant ballad, has more keyboards, perking up the softest song on the record. John Bonham's distinctively heavy percussion keeps going throughout, giving the song a sound similar to some of the group's earlier material. It all adds up to a somewhat typical Led Zeppelin song. Nice, but nothing to write home about. Finally, I'm Gonna Crawl is rather dull. Beginning with syrupy strings, the bluesy song crawls along for a while without ever getting off the ground. Like Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti in 1975, In Through the Outdoor has a loose, unpolished sound intended by producer Page to make the group sound rough. The musicianship is first class, as usual, but with songs like In the Evening, Carouselambra, and I'm Gonna Crawl taking up half the album, In Through the Outdoor cannot be called a success. perhaps the members of Led Zeppelin should have taken a bit more time writing the songs and a little less time worrying about the different album covers. Anyway, there you go. There's two pretty different reviews from 1979 after this album, after In Through the Outdoor came out, some critical reviews of the album. One of them where the guy said, you know what, it's pretty good. They have a good comeback, and another one here where they're like, not so great. Anyway, what did you think? First time you heard In Through the Outdoor, how did it strike you compared to all the other things that they'd been away for a while? This was the album that they were coming back after kind of taking a break for a little bit, at least from a recording standpoint, and coming back with that offering. And then, of course, that ends up being their last record. So put it in the comments. Which one of these two writers did you relate to more? And of course, as always, please like the video. Share this video if you have any Led Zeppelin friends that are fans. If you have any friends that are also fans of Led Zeppelin, I'm sure they'd kind of have some fun listening to this stuff as well. And of course, like the video, follow the channel, and leave us any comments. And with that, as always, have yourself a fantastic day.